There we are. Okay. Well, thank you all for joining us today. We have a great meeting agenda scheduled for today. You will find the link to our past meeting notes linked right down below. So just let me know if you have any issues accessing the notes. So since our last meeting, we had kind of a big development with our staff-facing needs assessment survey. And this was created by Jess Bowers at UW Stevens Point. Thank you, Jess, for creating it. We had launched it in December and got sounds like we got great amounts of responses. And this survey was open to the whole South Central Library system. So all the staff members were invited to participate. And with that, I'm actually going to turn things over to Jess. And she, if you need to share your screen, feel free to do so. And yeah, there we go.
Great. Well, thank you, Mark. And yeah, I'm really excited to kind of share with you the survey results that we had, and we're going to be preparing to launch now a patron survey. So I have a number of slides and visuals. I'll try to go through that, and we'll spend some time on kind of, I think, the meat and the potatoes part. But I was very pleased with the results. So just a little bit about the survey. So this was launched in December, as Mark mentioned, and to all of your staff. And I was very excited. 259 people took the survey. And so that exceeded my expectations. And I feel like I got a lot of really good information to share with you all, and some really good information to inform like our current placement with Liam. And, I know Madison is working on, and we're hoping to continue to I'll be placing students again here and then in the next few months, and really hoping to build on these library internships for those libraries that have a need and want to have an intern. So I feel like I got some great information. So there was 13 questions. So those of you here may have taken it multiple choice. There was some Likert scaling questions, and then there was a few open-ended questions. So I'm a social worker by practice, and I'm not very good at statistics. So it took me a while to kind of figure out how to correlate the data from the survey. And so I will just say this, the open-ended questions, I picked out some main themes, but I'm still kind of trying to code with some for qualitative analysis. So that is taking me a little longer, but I'll just kind of start sharing some of the main things. I do want to say this though, as I share this, because I know we have, for the interest of time, if it feels like I'm rushing through something or someone wants me to go back or clarify or further explain, please like raise your hand or unmute and interrupt me at any time. But let's see. Okay. Whoops. So first of all, I had asked, there was of the people that completed the survey, first wanted to identify what was the urban, what kind of library are we talking? Are most of the people completing the survey, is it urban, rural, suburban, other? There's a lot of unique things happening in urban libraries versus rural. And what's really actually interesting was it was most suburban or most urban, sorry, I think it was 81 people said they were working in urban out of the 259, and then 78 rural. And so that's good. That gives me a lot of nice information, rural versus urban. And actually, I'll just say this from a research standpoint, most of the research that's been done on kind of librarianship, library social work partnerships is done in urban libraries. So it's really nice that we have information on kind of rural libraries in our region as well. So I asked, like, one of the questions I asked was like, basically, what is your role at the library? Wanting to know, like, are you interfacing with the public? Are you doing adult programming or youth programming? Are you an administrator? And so you can see vast majority of the people that completed the survey are public facing and have some roles there. So So that's good information to know too. The most of the people that completed the survey are interacting with the public and the most at-risk patrons. And so I was happy to see that as well. So if you took the survey, you would know that there was about 8 scaling questions. So this was the first 4 where I asked some scaling questions about like in reflecting on the last 5 years, because most of what I'm hearing from you all anecdotally, as well as sort of what some of the research shows, is that since the pandemic, their roles are starting to change a little bit more since the pandemic, that the needs of patrons have increased, that the behaviors of patrons have been more complex, and so since the pandemic in particular. So I asked about the last 5 years, and if you notice in that first bar graph that this is by percentage, that most people said that the needs of the patrons they've noticed have increased, that the unmet psychosocial needs, and the next highest was strong, so that the somewhat agree with that. That second bar graph related to my role has changed. So noticing that you as a library staff member are spending more time addressing psychosocial needs. Most people said they somewhat agreed with that. And then second, was agreeing with that. Then I asked a question about, are you spending more time addressing mental health, substance abuse, or poverty? So AODA stands for alcohol, drugs, and that's the acronym for that. And the somewhat agree. And then addressing disruptive behavior. So when you feel like you're dealing with more kind of disruptive behaviors or difficult behaviors of patrons, which was sort of mixed. So somewhat agree and somewhat disagree. And the reason why I like to know this is I think that helps for training. I think it helps for programming. I think it helps like thinking about how can we mitigate some of that through our partnerships and through supporting staff in that. I can pause for a second if anyone has any questions or comments. Okay, the next 4 scaling questions were really more about how professionals feel about their skills, their training, their access to resources to deal with some of the more at-risk situations. And so the first question I asked was, do you feel like you're trained to assist patrons that are experiencing unmet psychosocial needs? And most people disagreed or somewhat disagreed. So I asked, like, I think that it was framed like, I have the training that I need to do this. And most people said they disagreed, that they did not feel like they had adequate training to manage kind of some of the at-risk populations. The second question was, I have access to the resources I need to assist patrons with unmet psychosocial needs. And most people somewhat disagreed with that. The third question, or this would be actually like question 7, was, feel like I have the training to manage behaviors. And this was more positive, that people are feeling they do have some training to manage more difficult behaviors. And then the last question was, our library has relationships with community partners that can assist us with some of the things that we're doing. And most people somewhat agreed to that. And what this graph sort of shows me is that there's more training needed and more access to resources is needed, but the relationships are there. So it's like, how do we increase this collaboration? How do we lean into these relationships? And some people, you're feeling somewhat prepared to kind of manage some of the more difficult things you've been doing in that role that's been changing. I did ask a question about what would be some helpful initiatives. So it was sort of a check all that apply. So some people checked all of them, some people only checked some of them. And by the way, the initiatives, the 17%. So for this question, I believe there was like 212 people answered this question. So if you look at the bottom, it kind of goes from least helpful to most helpful. So folks identified that having office hours, so office hours of interns or office hours of a community member. So maybe somebody from the job center comes in and does office hours. Maybe somebody from CAP or from your housing assistance, the housing authority office, come in and have office hours, or someone from a health clinic come in and do office hours, or DVR, something that was rated the initiative that would be the most helpful. The second from the bottom, contact for community resources, there was a question about the library being more of a point of contact for community resources. So anecdotally, some of those qualitative comments really identified that we need our libraries to have more resources available, to be able to provide them, to have kind of cheat sheets and resource guides, and be more of a point of contact. So not make it so difficult to find these resources. And then, as you can see, kind of in the middle there is many 10 to 12% of the people that checked that felt like university partnerships and internships and partnerships with your school districts would be helpful. And then the healthcare needs, DPI meal sites, and then community partnerships. Those were some initiatives, increasing more community partnerships. So I can pause there for a second. Again, I think I just find this to be helpful information for you all, as you know, and for us as we think about the ways that we can be helpful and we can build on our partnership. I did include just sort of some of the other, so these were some of the other texts. So some people, I had other box in those that what else would be helpful to you. So office hours at outreach events, and then a couple of the comments you'll notice, like, social work interns sound great, but I'm not sure, like, what would we do with an intern, or how would we support an intern? Is that going to be more work for us, sort of? And I think the one of the things that we're sort of developing, and I shared with Mark, was sort of an internship job description that I got out of a different library training. But one of the things that we're sort of, I was talking to Liam, like, just being sort of these new ones, we're going to learn as we grow, and we're going to figure out how this is going to be helpful as we go. And so it's going to be a learning curve, and that's sort of identifying, okay, what are the ways that this can be helpful and not feel burdensome and feel like a win-win. And so that was some of those comments I wanted to share. And then, just kind of training, as you can see, was also anecdotally identified. I also then asked, like, what kind of professional development topics would be helpful for you and your staff? And as you can see, and it was like a check all that applies. So some people checked a lot of them, but the biggest ones were working with folks that experience homelessness. How do we talk about, like, safety in the library? So training around safety, those were the two biggest ones. And then you can see working with mental health. So working with patrons that have mental health issues. I wanted to just point out, though, a couple acronyms. So when you see TIC, that means trauma-informed care. So training on trauma-informed care, or social justice issues that are facing patrons. Those some training on that. So this just kind of identifies some of the professional topics. I did, and I'll show you on the next slide, just some of the other that I didn't list that other people had ideas of as well.
I did have a question.
Sure.
What does HX of
Oh, I'm sorry. History of social work library partnerships. That was one of the, so just kind of understanding, and what I had, what is really interesting about library social work partnerships, and when Audrey and I presented before, Audrey did a really nice job kind of talking about some of the history of these partnerships, that librarianship in the last 10 years in particular, that what do these partnerships look like, and just sort of like, there really are a lot of, it's a really nice partnership because librarians are charged with serving the public, and social workers, our focus is really kind of more of vulnerable populations, and that what makes that kind of those partnerships helpful and unique, and there's a lot of shared values. So just kind of like, where do these partnerships come from, sort of. So that was one of the topics. So thank you, Mark.
Okay,
Is there anything else that seemed kind of unclear? The role of SW is role of social worker in the a role of social worker in the library. What does that look like across the country, which we've talked a little bit about in here before. So some other trainings that people felt like was communication skills, nonviolent, empathetic communication, de-escalation. these were correlated. I didn't get to edit these at all, but social work training for hourly staff and pay increases. Those are development topics. Yeah, so I'll just give you a second to kind of look at these, but I thought this was helpful information as well.
And folks, feel free to either to use the chat or speak up if you have questions, or if you think of something outside of this meeting, let me know and I can certainly send it along to Jess.
Yeah, for sure. And I have my contact in the last slide, and I know yeah, you all can hunt me down pretty easily in the social work department at UWSP by just Googling that. But yeah, great. Thank you, Mark. I also, so here is this is what I want to say about the next couple slides are related to the qualitative comments that people made. These were open-ended questions I asked, and I just want to be upfront that there was about 90 comments for each of these, and I didn't have time to code these very closely or like really review them. I'm still like I'm not a statistician, so I'm still not, and I'm not really great at coding qualitative comments yet. So I read through them briefly and sort of just kept taking notes of the ones I was seeing over and over, but I am going to do a better job analyzing all the qualitative comments. But in general, some of the strategies, so this was like, the question was, when you're working with patrons with complex needs, what are some of the strategies you see are currently working? And so these are the ones that I saw kind of over and over. And I saw a few comments related to that first bullet, like we stopped policing the noise levels in open spaces. So sort of we're managing the noise in study spaces, and that libraries don't have to be this quiet space necessarily in some areas of the library. And that has sort of felt less punitive. That the trainings, when people have gotten trainings, and the ones that I saw kind of over and over were mental health first aid, Narcan, active shooter, natural disaster, trainings on mental health, boundaries, those kinds of things. Also just having flexibility and kind of knowing like, okay, where are non-negotiables, if you will? Like what do we have to enforce, and what are some things at times like we could, so we can avoid that ban, maybe we can kind of prevent that de-escalation. Really, there was a number of like, what's successful is kind of leaning into the folks that have been here a while, and they have practice wisdom and they know what they're doing. Lots and lots of comments about wanting resource lists and connect patrons, like wanting cheat sheets, wanting resource guides, wanting kind of a directory of like, this is where you need to go, so you can have kind of a handoff. There was also multiple comments about Ryan Dowd. So it sounds like there's some trainings that you all use in the South Central Library System that Ryan Dowd has put together related to empathy, and homelessness, and people, it sounds like, really like those. So building on those types of trainings sound like that's been really successful. Using techniques like trauma-informed care, de-escalation, self-care, learning to set boundaries, really working on positive relationships. So when you build relationships, you're going to make more progress. Using empathy and active listening, and kind of know when to refer, like when this is where my skill set stops and this is where I'm going to pass this situation on. So I thought these were kind of the main themes that I saw. I'm going to dig into these comments a little bit deeper. I don't know if folks have comments on that, if these have been helpful for you in your libraries, or if anyone has any thoughts on this.
What I appreciate, Jess, and I appreciate all of it, is for those of us on the library end and in systems, knowing that the resources that Ryan Dowd has created, this survey and this information justifies the state subscription to Ryan Dowd's webinars and to his resource lists. So on almost a legislative end, I guess it's more advocacy, this is an example of something that we can take and share with our state legislators for library funding.
I'm so glad to hear that. That's what my hope was, Sean, that you would see some of this and be like, okay, this is what's working. Like, let's build on that. And this is how we can justify continuing to add these in. And I'll share this. I finished this up last night, so I will share this with I can send it to you and Mark after, and you're welcome to share this with the rest of the folks in the cohort.
Thank you.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. That's exactly what we were hoping for with this. And then sort of what other resources would be helpful? So this was all qualitative. So there was about 100 comments. So again, I really just sort of pulled what I saw as the general themes, but it was not like a systematic scientific effort. So I just want I want to be upfront about that. I need to dive more into that. But some things that would really be also be helpful, more mental health and substance abuse and training and homelessness, more collaboration with organizations. So people said things like other social service agencies, healthcare organizations, law enforcement, city officials, our schools, having just community resources, being able to pass those on to people. But just having more resources in general. There were a couple comments which I found really interesting that were like, people treat us like a community center, and we're not a community center. Some people are like, this isn't my job to kind of help. And that's, I think, the dynamics is that, you are, because of the digital divide, because everything's online now, the libraries have become something that we always weren't intended, or maybe you're not even wanting them to be at times, right? There is sometimes a community center thing going on there that is a little bit hard. And so just needing more resources, wanting to have that next, like a gentle handoff to more providers, more supportive patrons. Also, like sometimes feeling a lack of recognition, not just from the system, but lack of recognition from the community that doesn't really understand the role or give you any credit for the role you play in helping some pretty vulnerable members of our community at times. Lots and lots of comments about like, we need a social worker on staff, that that's so you can focus on your role and have someone else that would help. So that was a very popular comment. Lists of updated and helpful resources, and then finally the drop-in hours from professionals, like how can we get more of that? So I think a little bit about like Liam or interns, like that's even something I think our interns can do, collecting resources, but also reaching out to some of those community partners to say, hey, there's some spaces here. And, it would be really helpful if we had one day a week, we had someone here from housing, or someone here from the crisis center, or someone here from the job center, so you in your particular library identifying like where are the gaps, or where something we think would be helpful. I mean, we already know. I mean, Larry can comment like in Portage County, like there's refugee resettlement, DVR has office hours, right? Like, so how can that space, if you have the space and the capacity and interest, these are some things that I see our interns really being able to assist with. I think this is all that I had from our survey, but I found it really helpful. And I do have my email on here. You can take a picture of this, and I'm going to blast, hopefully Mark and Sean can blast this out to you all. But that's just sort of what my initial findings were. We are going to be launching a patron survey here soon. I've created in Qualtrics, and I'm having trouble getting it into a nice document that can be printed as well. So I'm working on that. I'm hoping to have that done by next week so that can be launched, because I think that will be helpful information too, because the libraries are diverse, like the Portage Library versus Madison, and the Portage, like Rosholt, and we've had the Macmillan Library. I know there's lots of different things going on. So yeah, so I'll stop sharing. But that's kind of the summary of the results, and I'm really thank you to those of you, and please pass along my gratitude to the staff in your libraries that completed this survey, took the time to do that. I thought it was really wonderful and helpful.
Well, Mark and I were really thrilled with the results. 259 participants. That was really, really incredible. I think that's the most we've ever received from surveys like this one. So Jess, thank you. There are about 50 projects that are going through my mind as I look through the slides that you presented this morning. So lots to follow up on.
Yeah.
Well, and I just hope too, and I know I'm sure Audrey and I think I'm interested, and I know Audrey and I've sort of talked about this too, like maybe there's some things we can do to help with some of the training too. We have a lot of resources on our campuses, or, you know, Audrey and I could put together probably some webinars together at some point, not to put you on the spot, Audrey, but we, you know, work together well. And I think that would be really enjoyable with some of those training. And I think that would be really rewarding for me too, to sort of assist with some of those additional trainings that, or support, whatever you can't access through the Ryan Dowd or other, you know, good resources you already have. So keep me posted on that, and maybe I can, that's a way I can work with Audrey on that too a little bit, if that's okay, Audrey.
Yes, I would love that. I'm also wondering, I know one of the workshops I went to at our Council on Social Work Education, our national conference, was Mary Nenow, who's done a lot of work with having social workers in public libraries, having like a sample learning plan. So like all of our social work students, I think that's one of the terms that we have, sort of consistent learning plan, learning contract. So students have to demonstrate competence in 9 competencies and 31 behaviors for the whole field placement or internship. And so what I've heard in other, when we sort of start new programs and new placements, is to have like a sample learning plan to go off of. So like, what would this look like? What would, you know, use of self, or client's right to self-determination, or, you know, what does that look like in a library setting? And how could you all help support students in that process? Both sort of that reflection and also hands-on activities and experiences and those kinds of things. So I feel like that's something we could also offer is, you know, what the competency is, what the behavior is, and then just a list of sort of, like I said, experiences or opportunities to sort of think about. And some might be relevant to your particular geographical location, and some might not be. So we would have like a variety of different options for you and your student to talk about as you're entering into this relationship, supervisory relationship together. And I think that's something that has been helpful in previous sort of new type partnerships and placements.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, thinking about just how many ways our professions really have in common. And in some ways, those the competencies and the behaviors, it's like where you can almost see where librarianship and library service really kind of meet together. I think that the survey results themselves really echo what we often, at least Sean and I have been hearing for the past few years, and I'm wondering, if that also resonates with other folks in this group, the results too. I see some nods. Yeah. Yeah. Great. If there are additional questions, I think what I'll do is go ahead and share the agenda. But if folks please do speak up if you'd or add to the chat, and we can certainly address them. All right. Gotta find the right screen. Got too many windows open. All right. Wonderful. I think so Audrey, you were going to talk about you kind of did touch on it on workshops or programs, but it was did you want to add to that?
So I mentioned the learning plans. I just thought I would just to sort of help think about your needs as supervisors within the library. So we and Jess, I'm going to speak for you. So just because what we offer you, Stephen's point, is absolutely invited, as you know, and so much of what we do now is on Zoom, so it's much more accessible than what we did in the past. So I'll just say that. But we offer a pretty large abundance of continuing education to our community partners and our agency supervisors. And so one of the things that we do is fall and spring supervisor workshops. And just just a couple of the topics we've had over the last couple of years is so they're all the ones the field office for the most part offers are really grounded in supervision. So how do you many of our supervisors in the field are not supervisors in their role in the agency. So it's a different role that they're playing with students. And so how do we support our supervisors be really solid supervisors for students, if that makes sense? And so some of the workshops we offer that we've offered over the last couple of years, one is centering intersectionality and supervision. So how does the supervisor's identity, the student's identity, how do you talk about that? How does that show up in your work? We've also done a series of becoming an anti-racist social worker. So really looking at your agency and your organization and the services that are provided and where are the gaps and how does your own implicit bias come into the work. We offer ethics and boundaries. We've done reflective supervision. We've done one of my personal favorites, or one that I do, maybe that's why it's my favorite, is giving difficult feedback. And so how do you provide feedback to a student on their performance where it is thoughtful and constructive and doesn't rupture that supervisory relationship? And if it does rupture it, how do you come back from that and move forward? And so those are just some of the ones that we offer. We offer continuing education credits, so if that's something that is of interest to folks. And then we also offer just a large number of other workshops and continuing education opportunities that you all would be invited to participate in. So we have a lot of lectures. So like the Deborah Beebe lecture, which is really focused on mental health. We have the Roberta Gassman lectures. This Friday, and I believe it's next Friday, is our Social Workers Confronting Racial Injustice Conference. This year, it's really looking at disability rights. And so if we have a lot of speakers, it's all on, I don't think it's Zoom, it's a different platform, but it's all virtual. So I wanted to bring that up because we have a lot of already sort of set workshops and trainings and things that we have to provide to supervisors, but we also have a lot of touch points where we ask you all what you need. So what is it that you need that you're feeling you need more support around, top, trainings, consultation, those kinds of things, because it really is a partnership. It's, the school, the student, and you all and your organization coming together. And so having that open communication and really, thinking about what's going well and what are some things that we can collectively as a team improve on.
Yeah. It's all great. Thank you, Audrey.
Mm-hmm.
Do folks have any questions or other additional workshop topics they wanted to bring up to today?
I think any sort of training is going to be, obviously we've been doing the Ryan Dowd, and as soon as we got Liam on board, in fact, before he got on board, we had him watching some of those so he would kind of know what the staff training had been in the past. And we do offer other things besides that, but anything that that could help us, because a lot of our staff does feel, why are we doing this? I mean, this is not what we signed on for. So they do feel overwhelmed and whatnot. And I thought some of Jess's charts were very reflective of that. And one other thing I'll drop in here before we move on is I was really interested in some of the responses from the early part of the presentation that Jess did. That's all, that really strikes a bell for us. One of the things that we've started off on last week, we identified a need that we needed somebody, to develop some office hours, and Liam was willing to do that. He's been working on a flyer to promote those office hours. With it, also some resources. Our staff all need to know where to send people because we don't know all the answers. And in the process of doing that, if you do it with your own community, you'll find a lot of things you didn't know about. We connected with a person at the Boys and Girls Club who recently got a grant, and she is now a youth homelessness navigator. And she's right across the street from the library. And so right now it's a grant funded opportunity. They hope to put it within the budget once that's over in the next year or two. So we've been working with her a little bit. We also recently talked with one of our city council people who in her off time works with the organizations within the community regarding homelessness. And now she's putting us on the email distribution list for all of those people who are doing that. So through working in this internship thing, we've actually made more contacts with outside people than we had before. So it's really, really great.
If I can just add to that, one of the things that Larry does that's so great too is then he loops me into these new little relationships and partnerships too. So that's been fun for me too, because I feel like our partnership with Portage County Library right now has been it's been a two-way street in terms of benefiting our program and then me learning of new services and resources. And yeah, it's really that not doing this on an island, right? And I think that's going to make this successful. So thank you, Larry.
Yeah.
And we have an organization across the street from the library that every day feeds homeless people and is a place for them to go other than here. And I think Liam's planning to head over there and talk to some people within the next couple of days. So make those connections as well. So that's great.
Fantastic. Great. Well, I did want to touch on things like deadlines and timelines, specifically for the prospective students. So I'm just wondering, like, what should we all have on our radar as far as like deadlines go for your programs, Jess and Audrey?
Yeah, I'll go quick because our programs are slightly different in terms of our timeframes and the types of placements we do. So right now, my students just started their spring internships, and some students are spring only, like Liam, meaning he's January to May, and then we have some that are spring summer where they'll go January to August. We don't do summer only placements. But here, the end of April, I'll be having my internship meeting with prospective interns, and I'll be receiving applications for summer, fall only, or fall spring. I'll be receiving those in early March. So what we mean by summer fall means, so students can choose whether they do their internship in the course of 1 or 2 semesters. If it's 1 semester, they have to do that either in the fall or spring. That's a 16-week semester, and those students are usually available around 25 hours a week. A 2-semester internship, students are looking at closer to 12 to 15 hours a week. So we do summer, fall, or fall, spring. And some sites will say, like, we'd really rather just have a 2-semester, or we'd rather have a 1. Well, the Portage County Library said, we'd rather have a 2-semester internship, but I didn't have any applicants last round. And so Liam was a 1 semester, and Larry was really great about being like, let's just try to make this 1 semester situation work. So that was really nice. But libraries are obviously going to have their preferences, and Liam is hopefully going to travel to some of the other libraries within the system. And, and there's ways that I can help supplement time when needed. But so I will be hopefully contacting libraries within the mid to end of March to prepare for either an early June or an August start. I will say most of our students are from central Wisconsin. I have placed students in Columbia County, like at their social service in other counties. So I'm typically, I think the libraries that will hear from me the most will probably be those in Wood County and Portage County and Waupaca County, that kind of area. Or Waupaca County's not in the system, sorry. The ones, I think Medford, just kind of around central Wisconsin. But I do often, it's not uncommon for me to have a student that's in a different area, like closer to Madison or in Portage, that might want a library placement there. So that's our time frame. So students will submit their applications. I think they're going to be due the very first Friday in March, and they have to do a caregiver background. As a reminder, they submit a resume, a cover letter, they submit a caregiver background check. They fill out an application where they identify their top placement choices as well as their kind of top population choices. And then I reach out and I send out a resume and a cover letter, and I'll say, I have the student that expressed interest. If you have the interest or capacity, I'll have them reach out to arrange an interview. That's just a first step, is the interview. So you might interview a student and think, you know what, I don't think this is going to work. And that's absolute. So it's not like if I reach out, you have to take that particular student. It's just that interviewing is the next step to you determine if you want to move forward. So, our job is to sort of be supportive and answer a lot of questions along the way and throughout the internship. So Larry and I, as an example, we communicate pretty regularly about when questions come up or what should be happening. So we want to make ourselves be available to help support the placements as much as possible. So that's what Point looks like. Is there any questions specifically about Point? And then Audrey, you can speak to what you all do. Okay.
No. Yeah, it's just so interesting how different we are in systems in terms of process, and similar. So we're a faculty-based model. So I actually don't actively place students in the community. We have what we call field faculty that do that. And so I supervise the field faculty who then work directly with the students on placing them and sending them out for interviews. So that's just a little bit of a different, and we have a BSW program. And then in our MSW program, we have our part-time program, and those students can be placed anywhere in Wisconsin. And so sort of thinking about sort of geographically where where our students are in our part-time program every year shifts a little bit. But primarily most of our students are in the Dane County area. So our students meet with their field, they fill out forms, background checks, all of that, and they meet with their field faculty member to get a little bit better idea of what they're interested in. So similar to what Jess was saying. And then the field faculty member has already contacted the various agencies on who's interested and available to supervise. So they have sort of an idea or like an updated list of who's sort of wanting to interview a student for a placement. And then the student is responsible for reaching out to the site supervisor, the agency supervisor, to schedule an appointment very similar to like a job interview. And then the field faculty follows up with the supervisor and the student around, was this a good match? Should we be looking somewhere else? Send a different student, those kinds of things. So I think that's the time frame for us is we're more of a traditional program in terms of like schedule. So all of our students do 2 semesters in field. Each year they're in the program. So fall and spring, same placement for that 1 year. And the integrated seminar. And so they do, depending on the year of the program, they do 16 hours in their field placement a week, all of fall, all of spring, or right around 20 if they're an advanced MSW year student. So they start in September and then they end like late April, early May. I don't know if anybody has questions or.
Yeah. All right. If folks do have questions, please reach out to Sean or myself or directly to Jess and Audrey. I did want to touch on just one thing from the next steps. So last year we had folks fill out a field placement questionnaire. What I'm actually going to do is go ahead and send you all copies of what you filled out and just let me know if there's any changes that need to be made specifically, especially I mean for contact information. That would also be helpful to have updated, and any new needs that you've identified or things that you think a practicum student would be great to take charge of at your libraries. So you can expect a email from me in the near future with your placement questionnaires. The other things like the information sheet and the library placement job descriptions, those are things that we'll sort of be communicating a little bit out in the between our meetings. But I did want to, I know we only have a couple of minutes, but is there anything folks wanted to share or ask questions on before we depart for today? Anything that you wanted to mention going on in your communities or your libraries? Or any questions?
This is Debbie from Portage. What I keep hearing is that Columbia County is a little bit in maybe in the O-zones. And I think there's a real need here in the Portage area. Columbia County has some particular needs that I think would be well suited to a program of this nature. We do have the prison system close by. We have 2 homeless shelters. We have Harbor House, Hope House, lots of community organizations that are trying to address needs. We have a mobile drug unit that is trying to come out to Columbia County, and legislatively we're working with some problems to get it here, but the drug problem in this community is really high, and there's just a pragmatic and practical need for for support. But we are also experiencing growing pains in that I think sometimes getting the word out that we are able to support and help people may be one of our biggest challenges. And so I'm guessing that even if we were lucky enough to get a social worker out here, it may be some time before we could reach all the people that need to be reached, and help them to understand that it's an option for them. And I'm going to be turning this over to somebody else to start working on, but I think Portage would really benefit from some of what you're talking about here in a really serious, fundamental way. But we might have to work a little bit outside the box, because I'm not sure if you were to schedule regular hours, how quickly you would feel useful, for lack of a better word. But I think you're absolutely needed. So I just want to plant that little seed with you, that even though we're outside of Dane County and we haven't had a lot of success in these kinds of programs, I think it's a very necessary program here in Portage and in Columbia County. And there are 9 other libraries in Columbia County, all of which are basically too small to supply anything like this. So Portage would be basically the only option for that. So for whatever it's worth, keep us in mind when you're thinking about your plans. Thanks.
I'll just quickly add, thank you, Debbie. I also, in my meetings, I always have like a little place that's requested a student, or sort of site kind of spotlights, because in placing students, when students put down agencies and I feel like I'm a used car salesman because they don't really necessarily want a student. Those aren't the best placements. The best placements are always the ones where students are needed and wanted. And so because, and even with with internships, they do have a slow start sometimes, especially the first time we've done something, and you know, that learning is going to happen. So I think but I will add, like, the Portage, I will add that to this, because once in a while, you know, we do place students in Columbia County. I've placed students before. It's not as common. I'm not going to have as many students available, or I can't guarantee I will, but it is something I can put in sort of the, you know, in the spotlight, I guess, or the request section of my meeting, which is helpful for students to know, like, where do they want us? So I really appreciate you saying that. And I know there is a need, and you guys, I've consistently seen you in these meetings, your library, and so it would be great to further partner.
Yeah. Great. Thank you. Tiffany, you wanted to say something, or?
Yeah, just to kind of share what things have been like over here. But yeah, I definitely resonate with a lot of the things shared in the report. I think, you know, we've had more incidences recently with patrons that perhaps have mental health challenges that they're working through. One being an example that's been fairly extreme lately. I don't know if any other libraries have experienced anything like this before, but we have an individual who has been coming in and committing acts with their own feces. Which has been pretty hard to deal with, and it's been hard to identify exactly who it is, but we do have kind of like an individual that we know, but it involves essentially vandalizing the toilets, as well as there was an incident where it seems they planted something right at the entryway as well. So I think, you know, situations like that, and then also some more instances with individuals needing support from a housing and security standpoint. And, you know, here in Monona, there's not a lot of resources, if any, to really support individuals with that. And so yeah, those are some of the things that we've experienced recently that have been very unusual considering things that we've dealt with recently. And I'm curious too if there's any sort of, resources on consulting with these matters and working with these individuals. Really, the only place that we have to go to at this point, especially with how it's edged on vandalism, is the police, which is not something that we always necessarily want to go to right away. We want to have those skills to work with folks. But yes, so that's just kind of a comment of what we've been experiencing. So
Yeah, thank you for sharing. That's yeah. That's it's a challenging situation and yeah. So I don't mean to cut anyone off, but in respect to time, I think that I guess unless there are any closing thoughts or questions, I think we'll sort of plan for our next meeting in April, and with some follow-up in the meantime. So. All
Thank
right.
you.
Thank you,
Yeah.
everybody. Good to see you all. Take care. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Great seeing everyone. I'll have the notes and recording out shortly. So thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.